From ContainerDays, Hamburg, this video is proudly presented by Dux IT.
My name is Sergiu Petean. I'm currently working for Allianz, but I'm also moving towards something new, which I'm going to be talking a little bit later. Today, I'm going to be exploring more things about containers, of course, and platform engineering. But first, it makes sense to set up a little bit of framework around why are we doing technology in the first place. As an executive at Allianz, most often and the most critical conversation that are being carrying out with huge consequences on the technology side, it's with business people trying to make money and build something new. So normally you have a strategy that you need to execute very fast. You have maybe a career that you have to build. You have many reasons to use technology in your advantage. And I found during the years that understanding those needs and addressing them and reflecting those in technology normally gives you strong arguments to build what you want. I'm representing today, as I mentioned, Allianz Direct. I'm not sure how many of you know what Allianz Direct is doing, so I would be curious to understand a little bit from yourself. How many of you actually heard about Allianz Direct? Wow, so we are doing good marketing. Okay, how many of you are clients of Allianz Direct? Okay, I take back the question. Let's ignore this one. All right, so Allianz Direct, it's something new. It's, you should think of Allianz Direct as a prodigy child that was born 5 years ago. And it grew exceptionally well. Over the past 5 years, we managed to go on 5 markets and become the leading insurance, the online insurance. We also managed to grow to an impressive number of 1.2 billion gross written premium. So these are all financial numbers, right? It's an impressive story. And we also scaled to more than 2.5 million customers, very happy customers. As we see in the surveys, we are continuously having. But today, we are not going to speak about that. That's for a different room. I have my colleagues from Allianz normally going to specialized conferences and speaking the legalese and the business language. Today, I'm going to be more focusing on the global digital business platform that more or less has a huge contribution on the success of the business platform. It is very difficult to measure success in our work, business success, to be more precise. You saw in the previous slide how easy we managed to use 3 or 4 KPIs and all understand that, yes, that's what success means for a business entity. Unfortunately, I felt that we don't have the same language and we don't have any standards available to actually measure the success of our work. Over the past 5 years, I went on a journey where I managed to build something cool technically. You know, I build teams, I build technologies, we change again and again architecture and technology stack behind the movement. But it was always very difficult for me to, first of all, to collect investment, to convince the stakeholders that they have to pay for that investment. And lately, as we all know, the whole economical pressure, financial pressure is getting very, very high. So being able to express success and the implication of that success on different stakeholders on the board level becomes more like a surviving skill. I didn't have one. I had so many conversations about why shouldn't we cut half of the team because you are actually running several teams which are very expensive. So how do you defend that? And so I was trying to mitigate the pressure. I felt it coming. And over the past 2 years, I started measuring and translating the KPIs that I was measuring in the financial language. So today, I'm going to mostly be focusing on this one. because I do believe it's essential for us to be able to use these kind of tools and be able to map the needs of every single stakeholder, ideally on the board level, because that's where the big decisions are being made, and defend our work and ideally get more investment in the future. The first metric that I feel is very important, and it's somehow addressed in the DORA metrics, is more looking at how fast the company innovates. For Allianz Direct, this was critical. We started with nothing. We couldn't use the legacy tool. We wanted to be different. So we had to innovate very fast and adapt very fast to go on 5 different markets. They had different needs, different regulation. How do you handle that? It's the only way you can explore. It's simply going with more features in front of the customers, getting the feedback, and then change very fast. So the innovation component was critical for us to measure. And we saw over the years that the more we invested in our capabilities and the more maturity we got, we managed to add every single year a certain speed. We got in 25, so this year we got to 100K changes. Measuring, there is a difference between DORA. Now, DORA is looking at the production environment only. I do believe that innovation happens mostly outside of the production environment. Now, that's where you validate a lot of features. So I'm simply measuring all the changes in all the environments, and I'm not looking just at the business innovation. I'm looking also at the infrastructure and configuration changes. Just to think about configuration as FinOps. It's whenever you change different params, and that's a configuration that has an impact overall on how your system behaves. The second KPI I like very much is the security posture. This is talking this time not to the business, so not to the CEO and not to the CTO, Chief Transformation, but this one is addressing the fear factor in a boardroom. This is where you have your CISO and your COO normally being concerned about the risk they are taking whenever you take change. So change, it's being most often treated as a risk. And as an insurance company, the things you have to manage is mostly cost and risk has an impact on reputation. And reputation makes your brand. So this is a critical KPI for several stakeholders inside the board. And I was looking more or less on how many vulnerabilities we managed to detect and fix, and we saw the number growing every single year considerably. Imagine that you save just, 10% of the vulnerabilities we fixed became exploitable. All the security incidents that those would be triggered would be extremely expensive for both brand, reputation, and of course for operation cost. The third KPI I created lately, it's the operational resilience. We are required by different regulations, and more are coming, to be resilient. And resilient means that you don't fail. That's one simplification of that. So managing to avoid those disruptions, again, disruptions are extremely expensive in the age of DORA. Every single disruption that has to be addressed costs you a fortune. So not having them is the best way forward. So thinking at your platform as an enabler for all that resilience and proving that with numbers. And the numbers I found very useful was the avoided disruption. And this comes from the practice of SRE, where you basically proactively, you understand your systems very well. You get the alerts, the dashboards, the runbooks, and ideally you react before anything happens. So this seemed to be extremely sensitive, again, to CEO. Then we had also, of course, the CFO, because we were quantifying the cost of incidents. And of course, the CEO, because the reputation can be impacted. So a lot of marketing will be simply destroyed because you're lacking the resilience. Not to mention the penalties that you might get from a regulator like BaFin. The fourth one, of course, this is a little bit obvious now because all the IDPs, they build around these KPIs, the productivity boost. But the way I decided to look at it's more the relation you have with the tickets that a platform team needs to handle. over the year, we managed to get to around 2,000 tickets that we received on different teams. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the topology I deployed in order to take the cognitive load and unsexy work from the platform engineers. So we created a shield for that. And those tickets, more or less, were filtered and being addressed with good documentation automation, and of course, with different levels of support that you can inject here. And we managed to save 2,000 PDs, which is quite a lot when you quantify the PDs of very expensive service providers. The next one is the scaling enabler. I'm looking at, of course, in my slide, I'm looking at the relation we have as a platform engineering with the engineers and with the employees. Allianz Direct, as you saw, grew and scaled very fast. So we went from 150 employees to 2,000 employees, 70 engineers to 700 engineers. And we did that without scaling the team. What we focused on was what I like to call digital sovereignty. We built internal capacity and skills, and we build on that knowledge more and more. And that allowed us more or less to sustain a growth that otherwise would have been insane. I cannot imagine us growing 10 times more because we would simply be too expensive in the first place. So no one would have paid the bills for that. Our relation, again, changed a lot. And we went from 25 ratio with engineers, so one DevOps serving 25 engineers and 95 employees. We went all the way to a relation of 1 to 70 engineers, 1 to 150 employees. The compliance enabler part, it's more important than I initially assumed. We had more than 10 audits just till now in Allianz Direct, and more are coming. The whole readiness for DORA, the readiness of DORA, and then the group auditing and the internal audit to fight the group audit. All that, it's adding a lot of complexity on the team. And we saw that we own so much of the compliance. You own the incident management, you own the problem management, the change management, you name it. Now, at one point, I had 2 FTEs out of 16 focusing mainly on compliance for more than 6 months. So the impact is heavily on your team. You just have to quantify the value of that. And then someone, stakeholders, ideally from the board, is going to pay for that, and also understand that this is something that needs to grow, not to shrink. It's not a one-time exercise. We also became profitable. It doesn't fit to everyone, of course, but ideally, you move away from the identity of a cost center. This is something that it's terrible for any initiative. So if you can do that and you become a profitable team and you start selling technology, consultancy, anything you can sell, then it's so much easier to have a discussion with your CFO. There's always going to be the conflict of how much do I spend, and then the CFO and the financial team is going to use different KPIs that don't really consider your own needs. So it's going to be a clash. But if you're profitable, all that noise is going away. The last 2 are maybe more interesting. I'm going back to the learnings of DORA metrics, where we have the reliability of something as something extremely valuable for an organization. And the way we measured that was more the lack of P1s. Again, P1s had so many consequences for us that we decided to always look at reliability in relation with the lack of P1s. Of course, you can hijack that. You can decide to raise P1s only on escalation. There are different ways to handle that. I would say we were honest, and with that honesty, as honest as we could, of course. And then with that honesty, we got to a 99.5 availability, which is amazing considering the scale, the growth, and the complexity of going on so many markets at the same time. The last one. This is financial performance. This was an extension to DORA initially, because I started writing OKRs. So we started with the KPIs for the technical side. Then we had the IT strategy being written. And you need to have KPIs in IT strategy. And based on that, you define OKRs. And DORA metrics, some of them ended up to be global accepted, but there was always the pressure from the board to really think about the financial part. And this is also a learning I had during my time at CNCF. I didn't mention, but I have a big contribution on CNCF, and I'm a huge fan of the work CNCF is doing. And we were trying to, in that role, I was trying more or less to advise end users on how to survive a cloud transformation. And we understood that different regions, different companies, different size of the companies, different sectors of the companies have to be considered when you build your journey. In our case, we had a certain budget, and we could not spend the same amount as Facebook does on reliability, for example, of platform engineering. So we had to find the balance between the budget we are investing and the return of that investment. And the financial performance, where we have a price per change, so price per innovation, that's something that made sense for us. Again, I'm using the 100K changes, all environments, and then I'm considering the cost of the platform team. That means tools, salaries, and some services. Not so many, as we're going to see next. Okay? So now that we know what success should be looking like, I can go back in 23 when I was part of the technical advisory board member in CNCF, and we were trying to help all the other end users either get the courage to start a transformation or to avoid, of course, failures of something that should never be built, or simply guiding them at some intersections when you need to make some critical changes. And the initial starting point was focus on let's build a reference architecture for the whole community. And soon, very soon, we realized that's not possible because, as I mentioned, you have so many different contexts. Now you have a tech company spending 100 million on something, and then, of course, they're going to have different KPIs than maybe you as a company in Europe working under heavily constraints now coming from regulation, having access to a certain talent pool. So that's quite tricky to fit everyone one single reference architecture. And then the next conclusion was like, okay, we build more reference architecture, and we clustered them on different domains, and then basically every single industry will have a run book, playbook on how to execute. You can relate to that because if they did it with your constraints, you're going to be able to follow the same path. But reference architecture is nothing more than a state. You don't know how you got to the state. You don't know what's next after that state. And therefore, we decided to write stories. So transformation stories. I know it's hard to read. That's another point. Please don't destroy your eyes. What is interesting is more the framework, the storytelling framework. I believe every product owner of platform engineering has to, next to the KPIs that you need to measure, of course, you also have to be a storyteller. You need to, and not just to your stakeholders, but you have to tell the story to yourself in the first place. You have to be a believer. Second, you have to bring so many engineers behind you and have a vision. So the storytelling could become a vision. And also you have to understand maybe if you can relate with other stories, where exactly are you fitting in that story? Where are you on that transformation? Are you still in the fake DevOps topology, or are you already doing SRE? But is SRE the same thing that others are calling SRE? And by the way, do I have observability and DevSecOps, or are they disassociated from each other? So you have to understand and express, I would say, a vision in a story. And once you have the story, you're gonna complement that with reference architecture, which is simply a state of where you are, and ideally a state of where you wanna be, and everything between. The delta is the backlog that you have that is gonna force you to transform again and again. What I found interesting is in all these narratives is that they have some commonalities. They all have challenges, whether it's budget, whether it's vision, whether it's talent, whether a stakeholder that wants to kill your product in the name of profit, I don't know. You have a challenge that you have to address. And once you have the courage and the support to address that, you're going to have to change. And most often the first change that you have to perform is going to be on the way you organize yourself and the way communication is being carried between different departments. And that's where topology comes into place, and that's where your identity comes into place, because you might have identity. It's extremely important. The way you see yourself, the way others are seeing yourself, your stakeholders, your consumers, that's essential, because if you're a cost center and they perceive you as something that has to be cheap, and then you're stuck. You're without any budget and without the right talent, there's no way you can move to the next phase. So that's the part where you have to start working at initially. Once you get the identity, I believe you're going to have the freedom to have an impact. That impact has to be measured. That measurement has to reflect an important stakeholders, again, ideally a friend in the board that understands why you are doing that. And if that success has a tremendous impact, ideally, on the organization, that will trigger more trust, more investment, and that's going to allow you to make the next step in the evolution of what we are doing. You're going to have probably initially an impact on the team level. Next, when you build a backlog, you build the product mentality, and then you build, of course, the vision and the backlog for a product team. Next, you're going to probably have an impact on the engineering, because if you have the freedom to act, you're going to show an impact, and you're going to have it on the engineering. And next, ideally, you're going to take that on the whole organization, as we did with the OKRs and different other initiatives. And ideally, if you're in a group like I was, then you might even have an impact on the whole group. In our case, we managed to create more or less 2 group standards, which are now sustaining one of the biggest programs in the whole Allianz group. So the narrative, it's important. The transformation, it's important. And identity, I cannot state enough how much you have to focus on that. This is the certain evolution. Let me go back. So this is a 23 reference architecture that we had. And this is the 24. There is a certain evolution. Again, the delta between the two is what we spend on in 1 year. And the learning here, it's probably you have to visualize for yourself and for the others what you're doing. This was one of my biggest issues when I joined Allianz Direct, because we had no idea what we are working on. And then I went to different parts of Allianz. I was doing advisory for them. And they always had the same problem. The team was overwhelmed. They were burning out on anything but what they were supposed to build. And they could not build it because they didn't know what to build. They didn't know where they are. So how should you know where you have to go if you don't know where you are? So first thing that I did in every single advisory exercise was always starting with discovering the stack, standardize it as much as we could, and then defining the future state, which is the target for us, and then get all the resources behind that to achieve our mission. What I found very interesting is that the reverse Conway maneuver actually worked. I talked to Manuel Pais about this one, and I really thank him for bringing team topologies in my life, at least. Because I saw early on that when a team is scaling, when an organization is scaling, the cognitive load of a stack that is built on open source, it's absolutely insane. And there were only a few persons capable of navigating that, and with a huge price. So how do you bring new engineers? How do you make sure that they get the holistic view over your stack? Because every single decision in a platform has to be made holistically. If you change something on IAM, it's going to break your observability and so on. So you need the holistic view. In order to accomplish that, I created this concept of DDOs. So it's a distributed DevOps concept where I organized the teams in different streams, owning different domains. And they were going on a discovery path. If you were capable enough to execute, you are an executor. If you're just starting, you are a student. And once you knew everything about the domain, you became a consultant, and then you had to spread your knowledge in all the other DDOs. And if you repeat that in a few years, you're going to have more or less an overview, holistic overview of your platform. And you do the same with hiring. When you hire someone, you know exactly where they're going to contribute, and you know exactly where you need more hands-on. So they're going to focus on that. And then the yearly targets for them is going to be more or less decided by the needs of your stack. Again, I mentioned we had to change our topology and the way of working. So while the whole organization was scaling, we were restricted to a certain budget. So we had to get creative. And the first thing for us was to get more time for us to get the holistic view. And also, I guess, to be able to focus on the backlog, to accelerate the Delta execution. We could not build the next state in 1 year. We wanted it in 6 months. That was always the target. So I did that by isolating every single piece of work that shouldn't be done by extremely expensive and extremely highly skilled engineers. So I isolated the production management. That was huge. This is where the incidents and escalation are being handled. The post incidents are being handled, and now with DORA, it's even more intense than ever. So we were spending here a lot of time. Now we minimize that. Then we had the ninja of the day, because this is a person that it's the interface between the DevOps team, the platform team, and all the others. And it's one person that we rotate every day. You get the expertise and the wisdom of the day. You understand the impact of your work, and then the next day you can go back in your state and build more in the real backlog that we needed to have. So this was essential for us to shield most of the engineers from the noise. And then we had the tech desk. This is the part where we handle those tickets, and we saved 2,000 PDs. And the team supporting this, they were like quite cheap, because you don't need experts. As long as you make documentation one of your key principles of DevOps, and you build great documentation, you keep it alive, then you can bring really junior people that want to learn more from real operations, and they are happy to do the effort while they are also doing the not so sexy work of DevOps, which is taking care of different stakeholders requesting different things from us. We also had, you see on the left, we defined clearly how we want to have the relation with the stakeholders. And we also define every single squad, because we were serving 700 engineers. That means something around 30 squads. And we build a role of federated DevOps in every single squad. This is the way we said, we do not scale as a team, but then we demand 20% of the efforts being executed in a squad. We demand that effort to go on the operational qualities. And then we build a community of around 80 people that were knowing the platform much better, and they became in time advocates for our work. And they got the autonomy to build their own dashboards, their own SLAs, SLOs, and why not their own CI/CD. So this is the topology we found extremely useful. So the federated part, and then shielding the unneeded noise from us. That was something it's really worked very, very good. Another point I would like maybe you to take today, it's more the definition, at least the way I understand after going through this journey, the definition of a platform engineering. I don't like when platform engineering it's one-to-one with an IDP. I believe there are a lot of intersection with an IDP, but IDP has a weakness. It focuses on one single client, one single stakeholders, which are engineers. And if you do that, in large organizations, engineers are not really having a word to say on what you invest next. So basically, you focus on a stakeholder that is less powerful in deciding on your future. That's a weakness that you want to avoid, ideally. So in my experience, treating platform engineering more like a social, technical, financial set of practices that focuses on the experience of the whole organization. That fits so much more with I guess, making it sustainable in time. Another piece of thinking, I'm lately thinking more about this concept, the innovation sovereignty, and this is also where my next chapter is going to be focused on. I'm moving away from Allianz, and I'm going to be focusing on trying to build innovation sovereignty and advising on how to accomplish that through open source. That's something, that's a lesson I took from my time at Allianz, which has to do with the capacity to create. So the simple definition I found is can you actually create as an individual, as an engineer, as a team, as an organization? Can you write the next cycle of innovation, whether that's Gen AI or agentic AI or cloud? No, we still have to master cloud in most of the organization. And it has a certain relation with the other types of sovereignty. You have the state sovereignty, self-determination. Then you have digital sovereignty, which is, you take the sovereignty, the physical sovereignty in the digital realm. And now you have more intersection than ever because the next president will be elected on TikTok and not in the mass media. So the lines, the separation line is really disappearing. And when we talk about sovereignty in Europe, we normally think about cloud, data, infrastructure. But where is the talent? Where is the knowledge that needs to build all that or operate all that? And this is what I like to call innovation sovereignty. This is what I did in Allianz Direct, because in 21, when I joined, I found a team of externals doing all the hard work. And we had a very strange relation with freelancers. They could only stay 6 months. So you can imagine, it's something so complex. You were spending 2 months in onboarding, 1 month offboarding, and ideally writing some documentation. And you were not capturing any wisdom from here. No? So I built internal capacities for that. I built an internal. I was relying 100% on internals for execution and for wisdom collection. And externals and our service providers, they were playing the role of a challenger and bringing innovation back in the team. So we found this interesting relation between the two. Some examples about sovereignty in case you need more details about that. I guess we need the state. We all know what state sovereignty means, especially with the Greenland situation. There's no need to focus on that. The digital sovereignty, we experience it here in Germany when maps, something we have zero control over. It's a very boring service that we are all using it every single day, and yet could have tremendous impact on us on a daily basis. So that's a pure example from my point of view about digital sovereignty. And of course, we have the innovation sovereignty, which it's not about isolation. Normally, we treat sovereignty as let's isolate ourselves from everyone else. Well, I would say innovation sovereignty, it's focused on cooperation, strategy, and especially on talent. And I was very happy that someone asked Kelsey about his understanding of sovereignty, hope in Europe. And he pointed out that all the talent already exists. It's just a matter of strategy, more or less. So I do believe we have that. My teams in Allianz are all based in Europe, and they are doing an amazing job. So I can testify that it is indeed possible. And of course, you need 5 ingredients to acquire that capacity to create. You need to have the vision, something we are lacking in Europe, from my point of view. You need to build a certain culture, which is hard because you need a technology culture, a technological culture. We don't really have that in most of our organizations in Europe. What we have, it's a cost center culture. Tech, it's a cost center you need to contain and squeeze as much as you can from it. You never see it as something strategically to be executed on. So having that culture of innovation and technology backbone, that's needed. And then, of course, you need companions and enablers. We mostly have that. Not that much in Europe, maybe. In Europe, we execute more on the old legacy stuff and cloud transformation, which is lift and shift. We need more of advisors and consultants that can guide us through the other parts of this recipe. And then you need the tech. We have it. Open source, I would say, is the right way to go. There's so much in open source, and we can add so much more as a market. And then you need talent, of course, and that's the part I like most in this. Now I'm going to do the innovation sovereignty advisory, and I'm going to be able to really discuss about my findings and my learnings. So happy to discuss with anyone interested in this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
From ContainerDays Hamburg, this video is proudly presented by DAX IT.